Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Leadership for the Now. My name is Florian Longo, and I'm so delighted to be with you today. And today I'm joined by Alena Ipanova. Welcome, Alena.
Hi, Florin. Nice to be here with you. And what a topic we are going to discuss today, psychological safety, right? So this is
Absolutely.
something that we hear a lot in corporate, in academia. So regardless which sector you are in, psychological safety plays a crucial role. And today I hope to bring in some new perspectives in our conversation as well, and give inspiration to people to actually think about how they contribute to psychological safety in their teams. And Florin, would you like to define what is psychological safety? What is it for you? And why is it so important in today's world?
Yeah, absolutely. In my view, psychological safety is that feeling of being able to be yourself. What I mean by that is that sometimes in the workplace, even with family, we're not able to be really honest or open because sometimes things could be used against us or we don't know exactly what's going to happen if we say something, if we make a mistake, if we try something and it doesn't work. But when we feel psychologically safe, we're able to make that move that maybe was not going to work, but that will lead to a new idea, to innovation. So if we feel safe, then we kind of have a we know that we have a safety net. So in other words, if I try this, it fails, then I know my colleagues is not they're not going to bully me, they're not going to criticize me, they're going to support me. And if we have that feeling, then we're able to be much more creative in the entrepreneurial world. How this looks like is if you have you know the finances to actually support your kind of company expenses, then you know that you don't have to worry a lot about how you're going to pay the bills, which makes you be much more creative. You're much more creative when you're comfortable, right? So then how can we create that kind of feeling in the workplace so people feel comfortable, they don't feel that they are watched, they don't feel that they have to watch their steps or watch their language, and they feel that they can really can have their saying, offer feedback, receive feedback in a constructive, non-critical way. I don't know if this is it's quite of a long, you know, explanation, but this is in my words and in my view, this is what psychological safety is about. What about
Yeah,
you?
thank you so much for
What do you
sharing.
think?
I really, I resonate with your phrase that this is your how you feel about yourself, how much you can be yourself in the environment. It really resonates with me, and I would say that maybe it's a classical definition, and we all know that it was Amy Edmondson who started this psychological safety movement with the research and everything in the medical field, in healthcare, and then we we are taking it now and apply into different areas and different industries. So basically, according to her, it's our ability to take risks without the fear of being punished or being judged if we do mistakes. And I would add here that this is also about our emotional stamina and our vulnerability, how much we are willing to share, how open we feel about listening to others, and maybe listening beyond the words, but understanding what's going on the background, because it's not only what I'm here to do the tasks and to manage projects, but I also have life beside that, my family. So everything impacts my state here. So how much I feel open to share if something is off, and how it impacts my work. So I would say this is the ability, the openness to actually express and feel that you are going to be listened to. And if we think about that, Florin, because we everybody talks a lot about it: open communication, active listening, feedback, and so on. If we take a leadership perspective on that psychological safety, what would you say leaders could do to nurture this environment, to create this open communication? What would you say from your experience?
Yeah, so the first thing leaders could do is stop pressure at their level. In other words, in every organization, there is a certain amount of pressure that is coming from above. There will be goals, there will be things that we need to work on. And as a leader, it's our role to be that kind of bumper between what's coming from above and kind of protecting a little bit your team. So do not just let that pressure get on your team, because sometimes for them might feel a little bit too much, too heavy. So the way we can create that psychological safety is that if we share all the worries that we have, or maybe that come from above, but that our team can do nothing about, it only creates more worries in the team, and they feel like powerless, and then it creates anxiety. So definitely stopping that pressure at your level, that's one thing that you could do. Then, like, all those things that you just mentioned, active listening, conversations, having, regular check-ins, I think all this, like a leader, you probably need to develop your emotional intelligence more than you think. I saw a
Mm.
quote the other day where it says, when you start a business and you go from the founder to the leader, then you go from doing work based on your IQ to doing work based on your EQ. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
you actually really need to, that's what you actually really need to develop. So I think as a leader, what we can do in order to be able to tune in with our team, to really understand what's going on, to read between the lines, to read feelings, right? Not only just hear the words. I think part of that is our emotional intelligence. The more we develop it, the more we're able to see, oh, what this person did, it seems like it was not perceived as well by the other person. So I don't know how the other person feels about it, but I don't think they feel really good. Meaning that you can spot behavior in the team, and you can spot
Mm-hmm.
things in the team that otherwise you would not. So I know this is not very tangible answer, but how can we become better at all of those things that you just mentioned? Constructive, open feedback, open conversation. Another thing is building trust. If you think about it, all things that we just talk about and the benefits of psychological safety come from an environment where you can trust each other. If there is no trust there, then it cannot be psychological safety. All things, are based on trust, right? Or
I would add here in terms of trust. So to me, trust is more one-on-one process. Even if you take team setup, we can have different levels of trust with different team members and with different things as well, because it's not just about I trust this person, but what do you trust this person with? Right? So when we talk about psychological safety, it's the group towards one person. Do I, as an individual, feel safe to share with the team? So in this sense, I think it's important to understand that these are maybe two linked together, but different processes in a sense. And I love what you're saying about the feedback and active listening. And I have this idea that actually it would be good to have these regular conversations with the team. And if the purpose is to develop, to nurture psychological safety with all the benefits that it can create, then everybody can actually voice out what is that I personally want to work on. And maybe I want to improve my active listening. What kind of support can I ask from my team members so that people keep each other accountable and at the same time they navigate with behaviors. So it's not targeting person, right? So it's all about shifting our behaviors and seeing what's the impact of that, what's the value that we are creating for the team with that. So that would be my take on it.
yeah,
If we talk about more practical things, what do you think and the benefits? Like, what are the benefits? why do we need psychological safety?
Yeah, well, it's quite difficult actually to measure, psychological safety and measure the benefits, right? It's almost like even diversity and inclusion, it's all one of those things that is not easy to measure, right? Many people, know, we kind of know it's good to have psychological safety. It's good to have diversity and inclusion, or for people to feel included, but it's maybe difficult to measure. And so the benefits of psychological safety, if we think about ourselves when we are at our best, when we feel safe with our family, with our loved ones, then that's when we are the most creative. That's when things, even a setback doesn't seem to hurt, because you have your support from your family, you have your support from your colleagues. So it builds resilience. If people feel safe in the workplace, it builds resilience. Even if the team has a setback, they will be much easier for the team to recover from that setback. There will be people on the team that will support you rather than maybe bring you down and use that mistake against you. And also, we're not like, the team will be more innovative, will take more risks, will try new ways of doing things if they feel there will be no punishment if they fail. That's part of the psychological safety, like the failure culture, right? How does our team, our organization sees failure, right? Is failure something to be celebrated because we know that only by failure can we learn how things work better, and innovation comes from failure? Or you know are we punished if we only focus on the results and the metrics, that the KPIs, and if we make a failure here, then that will affect the KPI, and then if the KPI is more important than the progress or the well-being of the team, that's when we maybe tend to prioritize other things. So these are some of the benefits that I see with psychological safety. What do you think?
Mhm. I really like you mentioning diversity here, because now I'm thinking about that, because we also talk a lot about diversity, and diversity in meaning not only a different combination of visual diversity, but also cognitive diversity, different ways of thinking, different ideas. So, and especially for innovation, it's very important that people actually dare to bring it all on the table and share their thoughts, and also challenge each other in a healthy way. So if there's no psychological safety, we might say that we don't really tap into the full potential of diversity. And in this case, diversity will rather cause difficulties or challenges, right? So then homogeneous team might perform better in this sense. So
Yeah,
I would say, to unlock the potential of diversity, we also need psychological safety for people to dare to voice their opinions.
yeah.
So this perspective is quite interesting to look into, I think.
Absolutely, and I still think there is a big impact of trust into creating that psychological safety. Because I don't know about you, but I can't feel my be myself and feel safe around people that I don't fully trust, right? So I know there are two different aspects of leadership. Trust is one, psychological safety it's another one. But when I think about, if we think about the five dysfunctions of a team from Patrick Lencioni, right? The first one is the lack of trust. And what he
Mm-hmm.
wants to say about trust is, am I trusting my teammates that they have the best intentions? In other words, when we're debating a topic or we working on a project, am I trusting that they really want the best for us as a team, or that they have maybe their kind of agenda because they want maybe to look good in this situation or benefit from this
Mm.
situation, or maybe they have other hidden purposes? And I think that kind of trust, for me, it's foundational if we want to create psychological safety. If I don't trust my leader, then I'm gonna be not gonna be open, because I don't know exactly how this is gonna be used. So then, well, it means that I'm not really feeling safe sharing, right,
Mm-hmm.
and opening up. And I think that's where That's where, trust has a really big saying in creating a psychological safe environment.
I see what you mean. Definitely, I agree with that. That it should be a mutual contribution to trust processes as well. And I think it's important here to think about what are we trusting with, because again, due to my background in intercultural leadership, I would say how we develop trust is also based on our cultural background impacts that in a way. And sometimes it's based on relationships, sometimes it's based on tasks. Do I see this person doing what they say or not, or we just have a good relationships, and then I rely on this person what they say just based on that. So these are also different processes. Maybe to give more practical tips to leaders if they want to assess and start working with psychological safety or just think about it. Maybe we can discuss some practical strategies. What do you think?
Yeah. So how do we measure psychological safety? Do you have
Oh,
a?
this is a this is a good question. I actually use assessment which is called Growth Zone, and it was developed by Csaba Toth and ICQ Global. And
Mhm.
it's not only psychological safety that this assessment measures, but also motivational drive. And in terms of that, they measure psychological safety on different scales. So these scales are courage, vulnerability, inclusivity, and collaboration. And from my experience, I can see that if we sometimes we have pretty high score on psychological safety in a team, but there is also one component which is called tension score. So we can see on which scale people's opinions are different. For example, some of them feel that they are totally included, and others might feel that no, the level of inclusion is quite low. So basically, it helps to identify where the problem is, and we can structure our steps based on data. So it's not about guessing that, okay, something is missing here, but we know exactly on which scale. And beside that, I believe there are so many surveys and other types of assessments like Timothy Clark, 4 stages of psychological safety. So they also assess psychological safety in a team. But I think the most important point here is that we have to measure that. If we want to improve something, we have to measure that. So just thinking about what we can do to define, to identify what is the state of psychological safety. Are we happy with that? What are we going to do about it based on data? This is a good and solid first step.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I agree.
what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think the when it comes to psychological safety, it's a nuance. You know, it's a nuanced topic, meaning that um, I see this with, for example, the usual now surveys that organizations are actually using for their teams. They want to take the pulse of the organization, and based on if you only use kind of we call this a quantitative. So I don't know exactly the way the assessments that you mentioned work, but what I have seen with the quantitative assessments, meaning that, for example, you give a scale from 1 to 10, and you ask people to rate, how they feel in different areas. This actually, it's leaving out all the feelings and the nuances of a 7. Let's say someone says a 7. Well, a 7 for you might be something different for me, and what I think needs to be added on top of is a kind of an open-ended questions or
Mm-hmm.
fields where people can put kind of try to describe what 7 means for them, because
Mm-hmm.
we might see that and this also coupled with the interculture or the different cultures, like think about how open are maybe the Latin, people living in Latin America or in the south of Europe to conflict or to conversation or to arguments compared to maybe people living in Scandinavia. So if we have a kind of a debate around the table, which gets a little bit more heated, then is not going to be a problem for someone which is used with that, right? I come from Romania, and I used to kind of raise my voice to make a point, and that might sound like threatening for someone else, right? So I think
Yeah.
what we could add to those measurement tools is to make sure that we're not leaving out the people's feeling, and kind of you get that qualitative actually measurement, which comes from what kind of words do they use to describe how they feel about this, right? And then see if we can see any patterns in those words that people use to kind of add even more nuances to whatever the scale was. If we're happy with the score, right? Okay, but what does it mean, that score? What kind of words would people use to describe those scores? And I think that's where we need to, because I see organizations being happy with having a engagement score of X or Y, but not really going into what does it mean. And because if you only give people options from 1 to 10, they'll choose a number. But who defines the scale, right? Most likely or least likely, right? That's kind of usually the ends of the scale. So what I think is just we need to, in a way or the other, either through having open-ended conversation or open-ended surveys, to maybe get more of what people feel, to kind of get a little bit more context for that data that we're measuring. That's what I
This
think
is a good point. This is a very good point. And anyways, it's encouraging open conversations is one of the things that leaders could do on a regular basis. Plus, if we have data, we can also structure our conversations around the data and see, okay, this is what we've got in our team. Let's talk about what does it mean and what do we do about that? Because then once the data is there, you can't really ignore that.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking from the practical perspective as well, because recently one of my clients shared the story that he doesn't feel psychologically safe, even though his manager says that I'm open for a conversation, you can come to me anytime. But still, he says that something is off. I can't really put my finger on it, but I don't feel like I really want to open up and enter that door. And it makes me think also about the behavioral patterns and also the words, how we use, in other words, how we signal psychological safety, not only what we say that I'm open for a conversation, bring in your issues, share your challenges. I'm not going to judge you, but it should be something more in signaling psychological safety. And I think that here we can think about, from the practical point of view, reflect on how we structure our requests, or how we structure our inquiry to people, how we frame it. Do we frame failure as a bad thing or as an opportunity, for example? Or how we talk to people, let's say, I'll tell you, Florine, we need to talk. So come to my office tomorrow, and we talk about that, about yesterday's meeting. And then I leave you with that.
Yeah.
What your thought process are gonna be
Worst case scenario.
until we meet? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
these are the things we can reflect on and think, actually, how do I contribute to psychological safety, or how am I threatening psychological safety? Because very often it's not about building psychological safety. It's more about removing the threats. And then opening up space to, okay, what do we want to have more of, and how do we nurture this space for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good wrap up, because also then it puts the focus on the individual as well, because it is not only the leader and their kind of behavior, because if you your example, actually you say one thing and then you kind of send another signal, differently. So what I see, one side of psychological safety is also putting the responsibility on the individual, because it's not only the leader that builds it or breaks it down, it's each individual, right? I mean, am I willing to open up, right? To have open conversation? Am I willing to be vulnerable and say, hey, this is what I really think, or this is how I feel? Am I willing to provide feedback and receive feedback on my behavior, or the way I contribute to it, and then each individual to be respectful and inclusive with the team. I think you're making such a good point, because what you were just sharing is someone with the high EQ would gonna be able to pick up if there is a mismatch between the words and the behavior, right? You say, I know you tell me that, but I don't feel that, right? So I think you're making such a good point, and that's why I think it's circling back to being able to read between the lines, to be able to express your emotion, and also to be aware of your emotions. If you say something and you really mean it, but you say it in a way that is perceived differently, then it's not really creating the results you want, right?
That's true, Florin. I'm also thinking right now, when I'm listening to you, that in terms of vulnerability, because not all people actually want to be vulnerable, or we also have different scales of vulnerability, how much we are willing to share. And I think that no one have to share if they don't want to. So there should be the environment where they might share what is needed to be shared. We ask ourselves, what do I need to know about my team members, so that we could work well together, so that we could communicate better? So I think from this perspective, otherwise we don't want people to bring all the stuff with them from their family and other happenings. So we need to work on our boundaries as well. And I think this part is also crucial. We talked in one of our shows about the importance of self-leadership, and how we actually manage our own emotions and how we check in with ourselves. And I think here it's a perfect example as well. To which extent are you willing to be vulnerable? With what exactly? What do you think you need to share? You need other people to know in order to work together well. So if everyone asks this question and share, then it's going to be much easier to set up more positive and open team dynamics, I think. Personal boundaries, very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is a topic that we could spend much more time in discussing, but I think this is a good wrap up for our show today. We're almost at the 30 minutes mark, and I think we cover some things that we hope will help our viewers and our audience. And as usual, if you have any, like if you're watching this and you have any thoughts about any topics you want us to cover in the future, we're gonna also try to bring other guests on the show here. And then we're gonna try to equip you with the things that we can. So I think that's a wrap, right?
Yes. Thank you so much for our wonderful conversation today.
Absolutely, the pleasure was mine. All right, thank you for tuning in. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.